The first time Beverly Hearthstone screamed that my antenna had to go, she was standing in my driveway like she paid the mortgage, one hand on her hip, the other stabbing the air on my garage roof like she was ordering an execution. Then she did something so stupid, I almost laughed before I got mad. She climbed up, swung a broom handle, ripped a federally protected satellite dish off my house, and smashed $1,400 worth of communications equipment all over my concrete while half the block listened to it die. The metal hit hard, cables snapped, plastic shattered, and she stood there smiling like she'd just saved civilization from one ugly piece of hardware. What she didn't know, what she never bothered to know, was that I had her on camera from 3 angles, in high definition, with a clean timestamp and audio sharp enough to catch every clang. So I just looked at her and said, real calm, keep going, Beverly. You're making excellent evidence for the FCC and the sheriff. That wiped the smile down a little, but not enough. Not yet. I live in Millbrook Crossing in Central Virginia, the kind of subdivision where the grass is always suspiciously perfect, and people wave with the careful energy of folks who absolutely gossip about each other the second the front door closes. In summer, the whole place smells like cut grass, hot asphalt, and mulch. At dusk, the cicadas scream from the tree line like they're trying to settle an old score. You've got split-level houses, tidy ranch homes, and a few oversized places up on the hill where, funny enough, most of the HOA board members lived. My name's Garrett Winslow. I'm a disabled veteran, former military communications specialist, and these days I volunteer with County Emergency Management as an Oxcom operator. That means when storms chew up the grid, when cell service goes sideways, when the normal systems blink out and people suddenly remember how fragile modern life really is, people like me help keep information moving. It's not glamorous. Nobody makes a movie about a man in his kitchen relaying weather traffic over radio while the power flickers. But when it matters, it really matters. My setup wasn't some junkyard science project, either. That's important because Beverly spent months trying to paint it that way. The dish was mounted on a rear-facing bracket over my garage, mostly hidden from the street, legal in size and placement, and tied into my emergency communication setup. You couldn't even see the thing unless you came snooping down the alley behind the garages and peered through a warped gap in my fence like a raccoon with a clipboard. That was Beverly's specialty, snooping with authority. She'd been HOA president for 6 years, wore pressed blazers like she was campaigning for governor, and carried herself with the smug confidence of a person who had discovered, very late in life, that tiny amounts of power were more intoxicating to her than wine, religion, or friendship. She also reminded everybody she was a licensed real estate agent so often that I'm pretty sure even the squirrels knew it. She'd had it out for me long before the antenna. A couple years earlier, I put in a simple aluminum ramp at my front steps because my left knee, which had been through enough already, liked to turn cold weather into a personal insult. Beverly sent me a certified letter saying the ramp disrupted the visual harmony of the neighborhood. I mailed back a polite response with the Fair Housing Act attached, like a gift-wrapped warning. She backed down, but people like Beverly never really let go of humiliation. They store it. They feed it. They wait for a better chance. After that came the violation notices. 11 of them over 18 months. My garden edging was the wrong color. My flagpole was too tall. My pickup truck in my own driveway was suddenly a commercial vehicle because it had a toolbox in the bed. $50 fines stacked up in threatening little envelopes, and every single time I appealed, every single time I won. I kept every letter in a manila folder labeled Beverly's Greatest Hits, which honestly brought me more joy than it probably should have. Then she found the dish. Not by accident, either. Old Terrence Beaumont told me later he heard her heels crunching in the gravel alley behind the garages one afternoon, and he knew that sound meant trouble. Terrence was a retired firefighter, one of those solid men who never wasted words because he'd spent enough of his life around real emergencies to know most drama was just theater in nicer clothes. Beverly spotted the dish through that gap in my fence, took photos, and filed a notice the same day. 14 days to remove the unauthorized exterior structure, or the HOA would start fining me $200 a week. I read that notice twice, set on the table, and made myself a very slow cup of coffee. See, The thing Beverly didn't know was that federal law had already beaten her. The FCC's ODERD rule protects qualifying satellite antennas and similar reception devices on private property. Add in the emergency communications angle, the county registration, the clean placement, and she was picking a fight she had already lost. She just hadn't been informed yet. I could have led with that. I didn't. Sometimes the fastest way to end a bully is to let them walk a little farther into the open. So I wrote back politely, asked for more time, mentioned I was reviewing the covenants and consulting counsel. Standard stall. Professional tone. Just enough to make her think I was nervous. Instead, I was loading ammunition. She called an emergency HOA meeting a week later. Beige room, folding chairs, industrial carpet smell, fluorescent lights, buzzing overhead like irritated insects. Beverly taped a blurry photo of my dish to a whiteboard like she was unveiling evidence in a murder trial. 3 board members sat with her. 2 didn't look thrilled. Dex Hollingsworth, a younger guy in IT who had the tired expression of a man who had joined the board meaning well and then immediately regretted it. And Patrice Okafor, a sharp older woman who clearly had no patience left for Beverly's nonsense. Mr. Winslow, Beverly said, using the formal tone people use when they want to sound official and hostile at the same time. Do you intend to remove the unauthorized structure from your property? I took a sip of coffee and said, I intend to remain in full compliance with all applicable regulations, federal and local. She thought that meant surrender. It meant the opposite. They voted 3-2 to fine me anyway. Afterward, Dex caught me in the parking lot and quietly asked, does she know the dish is protected? Not yet, I said. He almost smiled. That was the first crack in her wall. The second came from the county. Beverly started calling code enforcement, trying to get them interested in my antenna. An inspector named Phil Roderick called me, sounding tired before the conversation even started, and I walked him through the registration, the emergency management connection, the legal protection, the whole thing. He listened, went quiet for a second, then said in the voice of a man who had absolutely dealt with Beverly before, Mr. Winslow, I'm going to note that no violation was found, and I'm also going to note the complainant. That right there is something HOA tyrants never understand. The system they weaponize against other people keeps records on them too. But Beverly didn't stop. She started whispering to neighbors that my antenna was some kind of surveillance device, that I was running a business out of my home, that code enforcement had already found violations. Just enough poison to make people glance at me differently by the mailbox. That kind of social sabotage is cheap, effective, and cowardly. So I did the opposite of what she wanted. I invited people over. Terrence came, of course. Dex and his partner came. Patrice came. I grilled chicken, made the yard smell like a peace treaty, and walked folks through what the setup actually did. I showed them the county emergency management page. I showed them my credentials. I explained plain and simple that if storms knocked out regular communications, this equipment helped keep backup traffic moving. The mood changed right there over paper plates and cold drinks. Patrice got interested because her brother used to do amateur radio. Dex got interested because he understood systems. Terrence mostly got interested because he hated liars. And then came the twist Beverly never saw coming. 3 weeks after she smashed the dish, my attorney Sloan Whitfield called me and asked whether I still had the HOA covenant packet from when I bought the house. I did. Sloan told me to pull the section on the reserve fund. Required balance, $30,000. Annual audits, mandatory. Last one residents had seen, 3 years ago. Sloan had already dug deeper. The reserve account wasn't sitting at $30,000. It was sitting at $6,400. Nearly $24,000 had been drained out in administrative and professional services payments over 3 years. A handful here, a handful there, just small enough not to panic anybody looking casually. And several of those payments went to an LLC tied to Beverly's home address. I remember sitting in my kitchen with the phone in my hand, rain ticking softly against the window, and feeling the whole story shift under my feet. This wasn't just a petty HOA witch hunt anymore. This was theft wearing a blazer. Everything made sense after that. The nonstop fines, the procedural games, the pressure campaign, the obsession with squeezing residents who were too tired or too intimidated to push back. Beverly wasn't enforcing standards. Beverly had built herself a little revenue stream and wrapped it in neighborhood rules. Sloan told me not to file the financial bomb yet. Not publicly. Not until the timing was right. So we got organized. I replaced the dish and remounted it on the same bracket. I added more cameras. Terrence started quietly talking to older residents Beverly had been manipulating. Dex prepared a formal motion for an independent audit. Patrice agreed to second everything necessary to keep Beverly from procedural bullying. A few other neighbors came forward with stories of weird fines and made-up charges, a gutter citation, a wind chime citation, even a mysterious monthly administrative search fee that appeared nowhere in the covenants. The paperwork grew from a folder to a box. Then Beverly, apparently driven by some suicidal confidence only arrogance can produce, made things worse. She passed an improper fine increase without the required notice. She contacted my mortgage servicer about disputed HOA fines, trying to make me look delinquent. She sent a letter to County Emergency Management claiming my equipment caused interference and suggesting my volunteer credentials be reviewed. That one made me angry. Doug Pyall from Emergency Management called me the day he got it. He had already checked my emissions. Everything was clean, in spec, documented. Then he said, carefully, "Garrett, I'm retaining this letter, because what she's describing did not happen, and I want a record." That was the moment I knew Beverly was finished. She just hadn't been informed yet. By the time the annual HOA meeting rolled around in November, the air had that cold metallic smell Virginia gets right before rain. I woke before dawn, made coffee, laid my binder out on the kitchen table, tabs marked, reports printed, footage queued. I hadn't felt that kind of focus calm in years. Not since operations overseas, honestly. Not fear. Readiness. The parking lot at the community center was packed. Beverly's smear flyer had gone to every mailbox in Millbrook Crossing, and instead of scaring people into obedience, it reminded a whole neighborhood of everything they were sick of swallowing. 63 people showed up. The room was full before the meeting even started. Damp coats, coffee smell, fluorescent buzz, the low, thick noise of people who were no longer afraid to say out loud what they'd been thinking for years. Beverly walked in 8 minutes late with her usual 2 loyal board members, took one look at that crowd, and I saw it, that tiny flicker on her face when certainty breaks. She tried to skip member comments and moved straight to the agenda. Patrice shut that down immediately. Then the residents started speaking. Calvin Dorset stood first, calm as a judge, and asked where the monthly charge on his account was authorized. No answer. Sandra Pruitt talked about getting fined for a wind chime. The Beecham family talked about gutter fines. One after another, people spoke briefly, clearly, no theatrics, just facts. Facts hit harder than anger when a room is ready to hear them. Then I stood up with my binder. I explained the odored rule in plain English. I explained the county registration. Then I played 30 seconds of security footage. Beverly on the screen in that pale, orange blazer, reaching over my fence with a broom handle, knocking the dish loose. The crash when it hit my driveway echoed through the room, so hard you could almost feel it. Somebody in the back whispered, "Oh my God." I let that sit for one beat. Then I laid out the police report, the FCC complaint, the emergency management documentation. And then, very carefully, very evenly, I described the reserve fund issue. Not accusations, not grandstanding, just the records, the missing money, the LLC tied to Beverly's address, the legal review already underway. The room went dead still. That kind of silence is louder than shouting. Dex immediately moved to table all agenda items, pending an independent audit and a confidence vote. Patrice seconded. The vote went to the floor. Hands shot up everywhere. Beverly looked around that room like it had betrayed her. But the truth was simpler than that. She had mistaken fear for loyalty for so long, she couldn't tell the difference anymore. She gathered her papers with shaking fingers. A local reporter who'd come to cover the meeting asked if she had a comment. Beverly said nothing. She walked out into a cold, steady rain, shoulders tight, heels clicking fast across wet pavement. And for the first time in 6 years, nobody moved to clear a path for her. The months after that were almost anticlimactic, which is often how real justice works. Not with one giant explosion, but with a series of doors closing one by one until there's nowhere left to run. The audit confirmed the financial irregularities. More money was missing than we first thought. Beverly was charged, reached a plea, repaid funds, paid fines, and ended up on probation. Her real estate license got suspended. My civil claim over the dish settled. The FCC complaint stuck. Dex became HOA president. Patrice became vice president. Improper fees were refunded. The reserve fund was rebuilt. The neighborhood finally got the repairs it had been promised for years. Sandra still has her wind chime. Terrence now helps run the Emergency Preparedness Committee. My replacement dish is still mounted right where the old one was. And a few months later, during a severe storm, when cell service dropped across the county for hours, I sat at my kitchen table with rain hammering the windows and relayed emergency traffic through the very kind of system Beverly had called ugly. Doug texted me after midnight. Just 5 words. Good work tonight. Proud of you. That meant more than the settlement check, though I was happy to cash that too. What I learned from all of it wasn't loud or noble or movie pretty. It was something meaner and truer. A lot of bullies don't survive being challenged by force. They survive on the assumption that nobody will bother learning the rules. They count on exhaustion. They count on confusion. They count on decent people deciding peace is cheaper than resistance. And sometimes that's how theft, cruelty, and petty tyranny get to wear the costume of order for years. But sometimes all it takes is one patient person with a camera, a folder, and enough self-respect not to move just because somebody in a blazer tells him to. Beverly thought she was protecting property values. Turns out she was wrecking her own life with a broom handle in broad daylight. So that's my question for you. When somebody abuses a little bit of power for long enough and karma finally comes due, is that justice or is it just revenge wearing better manners? And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, a boss, a board, or any petty tyrant who thought you wouldn't fight back, tell me what happened, because I promise you, this kind of story is never as rare as people think.